God our Father, from the Lord and Savior Jesus the Christ. Amen. In this text, we have a very simple word that we scoot past way too fast, and it changes the nuance of what's going on, and it kind of sometimes pulls us and diverts us away from where God is taking his disciples. Peter, you know that great word who gets every other thing wrong, gets it wrong this day. Jesus is telling him that he's going up to Jerusalem, the city on the hill, and there, like the prophets before him, he is going to die. And Peter stands up in the Greek, says, "Me geneto." And we translate that simply as, "God forbid it, Lord." But me geneto is one of those things you really can't translate. It's a stopping point. At that point, we should stop and say, what's going on? As we read through this a little bit further, after Peter says those great words about, this can never happen, as though telling Jesus that God's will can't happen is going to stop God's will. God looks at Peter and says, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are a stumbling block to me." The word "to" in there sets the tone for this whole text. You are a stumbling block to me. In other words, does it mean that Jesus is going to stumble over Peter and fall? Is he going to stub his toe and trip so that Peter's presence interferes with what God is up to? God's word in their life. The other question is, you are a stumbling block to me. Is Peter going to be a stumbling block to you? Between you and God? Is Peter's words, Peter's being going to trip you up on your way to the cross? We don't want to ponder that one too long, because suddenly we might realize, I could be that stumbling block. And if I'm that stumbling block to Jesus for you, I'm in trouble. So before we get to that point, let's take a moment and learn some Greek. It's been a while. You ready? If you're not ready, raise your hand. Okay. Brian, just sit this one out. The word is scandalon. Say that with me. Scandalon. That's the word that appears here. You are a scandalon to me. What English word do you think we get from scandalon? Scoundrel, kind of, yes. But scandal. It's a scandal. What's a scandal? We know that what a scandal is something that we go, oh! A scandal is something that's engaged in that brings shame to somebody. Something that happens and people go, oh! You are a scandal to me. God looks at Peter and goes, oh! A scandal is a stumbling block. It causes people to trip. It forces people down. The cross has always been in Judaism a scandal. The moment of Jesus' death on the cross, as it took place 2,000 plus years ago, remains a scandal in our conversation between us and the Jews, because no good and righteous, just Jew would ever be put to death on a cross. You've got to do something really bad against God. You have to be a scandal to God to die that way. And that's what was reviling Peter. Jesus says he's going to go up to Jerusalem and die. And he had heard the conversation before about a cross. It's been nuanced throughout this 3 years of ministry. And Peter's going, no! God says yes. The cross, well, it's a scandal to us. It's the moment of life for God. What becomes a stumbling block for people becomes an open door for God. A scandal so great that we can't understand how God would ever choose to die on a cross becomes the moment where God's love gets poured into this kingdom so deeply. The cross is our stumbling block. When we trip over the cross, we realize, as we look at it, that it has our name written on it. It's our cross. And the scandal is, we won't pick it up. The scandal for Jesus' death on the cross is that moment when we deny that we are called by Jesus to pick up that cross. It's there for life, he says. It's a stumbling block, we say. We will have none of that. And Jesus says you have to have all of it. Today, this text is hard for Peter. It's hard for us. How can this God of love and life choose to die on a cross? It's a stumbling block because their expectations were they would be even with the Romans and everybody else and smite them. Just as little Peter, our neighbor, would say when I walked home from seminary, he'd come running out with his little sword on and his cape tied around his head and thrust his sword under my chin and say, "Prepare to be smitten, you Philistine." We would like God to do that to our enemies. But God says, no. The scandal is this. You have to die on the cross too. That's the stumbling block. That's our scandal. A cross. Amen.